What's up, Red Pill Man? I like to do paint by numbers, and I just started this one. If you can tell, it's a Italy. I think it's Italy channel or something like that. It's a channel where they got those gondola rides. I think you can see the gondola right there. And this here's the water, obviously, and there's some buildings here. I like Italy, Italy and France and those old school places. There's some beautiful buildings. So I'm just working on what's called a paint by number. So today I want to talk about the damaged Western woman. And I have not thought about this. I just thought the concept popped into my head to talk about it. So I'm totally just riffing here. I'm totally going off at the top of my head. Most of us in the West, and I'd probably include the UK and Australia and Canada to this now, have been permeated by feminism. And this is not a new talking point for me per se, but it's interesting to note just how damaged these women are. And we see examples of this every day on Red Pill content that we consume on YouTube. And thank God for that content, right? So we can see the examples of toxicity. We can see the examples of what to avoid. We can see the examples of what type of women are out there and how they behave and what signs to look for, right? This is what's so great about the internet, is that you learn, because people can put on fronts, people can fool you, man. And don't think that these women out here are not trying to fool men. Don't think that they're not out here putting their best foot forward, so to speak, pretending like they're Little Miss Sunshine, And meanwhile, they have unlimited access to millions of dick, right? I made a video, I think about 2 years ago, talking about how women use men for different things, right? This guy's got a nice car, this guy's got a nice body, this guy's got a wholesome character, this guy's a nice guy, etc. Don't think women aren't taking advantage of that, But with that said, let's talk about how they got damaged, why they're damaged, and what that means to us, So we live in a culture that is, this Western culture. We live in this culture that is warped and distorted. And you could make the argument that culture and society and humans themselves have always been warped and distorted. And I wouldn't disagree with that. But we did have a good run for a couple decades there, And we had a very kind of, you could say, godly family environment for a while, where you had a very good archetypal example of what a leading man, father, male, masculine presence was in that era and in those decades. Better than we'd ever seen before, and better than we've seen since, I believe. Because obviously you have to talk about the advent of the Industrial Revolution, which gave rise to massive corporations, massive markets for products, right? And necessary products that made our life so much better. right? And with that came an ease of living, and with an ease of living, with an ease of living, with an ease of living. Well, it's hard to say that. With an ease of living came idealism, and with idealism came behavior modification, and with behavior modification came character, standards, morals, and these things have always existed. It's just when you have a society and a culture and a human race that is really just in survival mode in one way or another, right? It's hard to have those things. It's hard to have. It's hard to worry about morals when you're worried about your next meal. You know what I'm saying? So anybody who thinks that it was always like that is not correct. And anybody who thinks that it can't always be like that is not correct either. Because we can have that. We've deviated, right? We've collapsed in on ourselves, or at least we're on our way to totally collapsing in on ourselves because of degeneracy. Everywhere you look, man, in today's day, in these years that we're living in, 2020s, everywhere you look is a woman advertising herself sexually, right? I don't even think they dare say, stop objectifying me anymore. That was a 1990s thing. That was a 1980s, 1970s thing. I don't even know if they're doing that anymore, honestly. I think they like to be objectified. I don't think these girls are on, they're all on OnlyFans. They're doing cam sites, cam girl work. They're doing porn, right? Like, they want to be objectified. They like it. It gives them confidence. It gives them vigor. You know? But it's a sign of the times. It's a sign of the collapse. When you try to normalize that, right? So you normalize degeneracy, you remove accountability, you remove morals, you are ruining the person, you're ruining the society from the inside out. Because a good structure of a society is good morals, good character, right? So we have these Western women who have been damaged, and even the word damage implies that at one point they were healthy and whole, and that's hard, you know. Is that true? Were they really healthy and whole at one time? Maybe you could argue back in the 30s and 40s, but see, the problem that what happened then was women said they had no power in society. Women said they had no representation, no rights, no respect, right? Which I don't know if I would agree with that, because I didn't live back then, and it seems to me that women were respected and honored back then for their role, for the roles that they played. But they didn't want that. They didn't want to be stay-at-home mothers. And honestly, it's arguable whether they had to or not, really. Because, the 19th Amendment passed. They got the right to vote. They've always been able to work. I wasn't... all these feminist talking points. I mean, is there proof behind these things? Were they really paid less back then for the same job just because they're a woman? I'm sure that they were treated differently. I know that. I mean, I'm sure that men in power abuse their power, but I think that I don't get a whole lot. You know, you hear the feminist talking points, but I don't get a whole lot of. I don't know a whole lot of proof when it comes to actual. You know, were they really demeaned in society? Were they really put down and oppressed, as they say? You know, I don't know, man. Sounds like they had it pretty easy, and all they had to do was stay home and keep the house clean and raise some kids. That's not quite as hard as a 9 to 5. You know, they were sold on a dream of freedom, and yet, really, all they are is enslaved to a man again. Because who owns the company that they work for? Probably a man. You know, it's weird. It's weird to think about. But anyway, that's from a different angle. But we see with that freedom came no responsibility, really, right? Because they blame men for everything, and they play the woman card, right? Oh, you know, don't blame me, I'm just a woman, right? So they wanted the freedom, but they didn't want the accountability. So they wanted so they got the freedom to not have to rely on a man, which, if you look at it from a biological standpoint, I guess that's pretty crucial, because if they had to rely on a man, then they would have to pick a man pretty much primarily for his resources. Yet, ironically, that's in their nature, and they still do that today. At least it's a prerequisite, right? At least it's a prerequisite for dating her. And then, you know, first you just got to bottom line see that you got the money. You're not a loser, you're not a bum, you got the money, you're not even average, you're above average. Because this is hypergamy, this is their nature, right? You got to have the money. Then they'll look at your personality and your character and, you know, all the other intangibles, right? So, you know, which vary from man to man, anyways. And we have a woman now who's so spoiled. Women in general are so spoiled that, again, as you know what we're seeing, which is why we see the rise of the black pill, the rise even of the red pill. We see a lot of men who are disenfranchised from the concept of family and love, because women are so selfish now. So it wasn't just about freedom. Now, you know, now it's hyper extended into you know, a fake form of godliness. It's hyper extended into idolatry, right? No, you don't just want to be free, you want to be worshipped. You don't just want to be free, you want to be put on a pedestal. You know, it's a weird thing, female nature, and it's solipsism, and I talk about this a lot on my channel. It's solipsism. Children and women are solipsistic. They have a hard time looking at the world outside of their own subjective viewpoint. They have a hard time being objective when it comes to really anything. Which is why you see so many women who tend to lean left, lean liberal. Because nuance is hard for somebody who is not solipsistic. Or excuse me, is solipsistic. Nuance is hard for a solipsistic person, because nuance requires abstract thought. Nuance requires looking at something outside of yourself, and that's hard to do if you think the world revolves around you and you can't get out of your own desires and problems, etc., etc. So today we have a generation, an entire generation of entitled, privileged, uplifted, idolized, behavior that is reinforced unfortunately, by simp men who were raised by weak fathers or no fathers at all in a lot of cases, because the mother ran them off or the mother divorced because she had a lot of feminist propaganda ingrained in her, right? So how do you find a good one? How do you find a, it's a tough one, man. And moreover, more than just that, how can our society be decent at all if the mothers are damaged, And then we wonder why there's just constant crime. We sit around and wonder, like, why, where did we go wrong? Constant drug degeneracy, with drugs. I live near Seattle, and we got a real drug problem downtown Seattle, and really all around. There's meth in these neighborhoods, heroin, and these Californians are coming up, right, from California. Legal weed here in Washington, opportunities. California is just a cesspool now. Can't afford anything. Drugs, crime, violence everywhere. Degeneracy, right? And we got it here too. It might be less. Out of the frying pan into the fire, it might be less than it is in California. Oh, but it's here. And now that they're coming up from California, they're bringing their bad habits with them. But a liberal city or a liberal state is that. It's degenerate. It goes in the name. It goes in the name. It goes in the description of what that word means. Tolerant, right? Tolerant of degeneracy. Morals are subjective. Morality is subjective, right? This whole ungodly, evil, satanic mindset that the left has. And don't get me wrong, I'm not pumping the right, because they got their hypocrisy too, and I talk about that all the time. The right is hypocritical too, but at least they somewhat stand for something moralistic and godly, right? At least they somewhat stand for it. They might be hypocrites, but at least in name. Well, you could say that about the left too, I guess. You could say, oh, well, at least they stand for, caring about the poor. And I hypothetically, sure, I'm with it. I'm for social safety nets. There's tenets from the left and the right that I like, which is why I could never lean one way or the other, because I see the hypocrisy in both sides. Anyway. How can we expect to raise good daughters when the culture is a cesspool? How can these women become good wives when that's boring? I mean, everybody wants love deep down, but this is why we see so many polyamorous relationships now. Oh, I want my cake and eat it too. You can't. You can't have that. It's not what it is. You can't have a main guy and see other guys on the side. And vice versa. You can't have a main woman and see other women on the side. That's not what a marriage or a relationship is. If that happens, you are no longer having a relationship at all. That is no longer a relationship. Too many people out there playing the field. Too many moonlighters. Too many people creeping around. It ain't healthy, man. What's the answer? Well, it starts in the family. And the family represents the culture. And the culture represents the social norms, the social mores, the social standards. We used to have something called social, we call it social stigma, but really social stigma is an indication of a standard. If you were stigmatized socially, it's because you didn't follow a social standard. And social pressure is there for a good reason, because society wants to be good. Society wants to be good insofar as it is healthy towards itself, if that makes sense. This is why neighbors used to talk to each other. They wanted to make sure their neighbor was not a weirdo, you know? And yeah, you do it cordially, and you're not creepily trying to, pry into someone's business per se. But you talk and get to know somebody, and you can gauge if they're normal or not. You're not doing it in a detective type of way. This is why people are cordial and nice, because it keeps everybody on the level. It's part of it. But you should be cordial and nice anyways. But the point is it's just that I don't think that's unhealthy. Now, yeah, you want to mind your business to for the most part, you want to mind your business in general, right? But getting to know your neighbors, it came along with that, like, oh, I got these neighbors, and getting to know them, etc. And people used to talk, is what I'm trying to say. People used to communicate, say hello, have conversations, right? And with that came the passing along of social standards, social stigma, cultural norms, right? But this concept of being a rebel came along. Oh, I go my own way, I'm a rebel, da, da, da. And that became the cool new thing through popular media, right? It's subtleties, man. The devil works through subtleties, how he influences a whole culture. And we see it decades ago. The anti-hero became popular. Marlon Brando, Clint Eastwood, right? The badass guy. And don't think women don't watch those movies too and, emulate or adopt personalities or adopt behaviors from that. Don't think women are not watching the same stuff guys are. But more so with the feminist movement, right? You see major movements and you realize that it's influencing on culture and influencing on behavior. Break free from toxic masculinity. Burn your bra. We don't need no man, right? And then what happens? Divorce, 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 divorce. A broken home is a broken life, really. To where now it's normal to be toxic. Now it's normal to not have any wholesome values. Because we've got generation after generation after generation. What, 5 generations now since the 1960s when second wave feminism came along? 6 generations now, maybe? Or excuse me, not generations, decades. Decades, right? Decades of indoctrination, decades of propaganda. So, I don't know, man. How do we salvage that? Well, the red pill is a response to it. I'll say that much. The red pill is a response to the degeneracy, to the radical, subversive feminism, which has stolen our women from us, stolen the wholesomeness in our women, right? And these things are passed down, man. They're passed down from mother to daughter, just like things are passed down from father to son. Masculinity, for instance, which is why the breaking up of the family unit is so detrimental to the young boys and the young girls, really. But when you break the father away from the house, and that's what the target of attack is, to remove the father and uplift the mother, right? Well, what does that do? That creates feminized boys who become feminine men, right? And tell me that doesn't further escalate the damage of society. It absolutely does. And this is something that is systematic. It was no mistake. It was no, oh, feminism just caught fire. No, it was engineered. That's what they wanted to happen, whoever they are. And for, or I should say, from whom, the ones who started it, from the ones who manufactured the lie. And you go back and you can find out who these people are, and they're radicalized women who really were actually lesbians and weren't attracted to men, and we let these women tell women how to be women. Imagine that. These butch, unfeminine women tell you how to be a woman. And so many women bought into it for whatever reason. Freedom. No, it wasn't freedom. You gain that in first wave feminism, which is fine. Nothing wrong with bottom line basic equality. But it became radicalized to warp and distort, particularly through sexuality, by removing the social stigma over sexuality, by removing the guilt over sexuality. And one of the biggest things was abortion. Was one of the biggest things, because then they really could freely have sex. All they had to do was adopt. I'm sorry, all they had to do was abort. Right? Totally just freed up any accountability or responsibility. And with that, essentially rebellion marketed as freedom. Rebellion not from men, not from men's control, but from social conditioning. Excuse me, I shouldn't say social conditioning. Social accountability is the word I'm looking for. And yeah, social conditioning is part of that, in a good way, right? Not social engineering from a evil puppet master, right? But social conditioning and social accountability from society itself, from the people. And who are the people? The families. You're supposed to be influenced by your parents. They're supposed to keep you accountable to morals, because they're the ones who are supposed to instill values and morals into you. So the rebellion away from the parents, who were old school, old order way of thinking, from this damaging, toxic ideology of feminism, really just ruined not only the character of these young women, but it ruined their future families. And it ruined the subsequent children from those future families. I mean, many women are going to have kids one way or another. Women love kids. Women are all about kids. So if she has this toxic straining concept that men are evil or men are toxic or men shouldn't rule me, etc., etc. You know, grr men, right? This is what feminism is all about. Grr men, right? If she has these toxic concepts, how is she gonna have how's her baby gonna have a good father, right? Particularly if we don't even know what masculinity is anymore, right? And women are all about kids. So what's that mean? It means you're gonna have a lot of single moms out there, because invariably she's going to want to pull away from the man, because her head and her heart is filled with this toxic propaganda. This is how Western society has become damaged. This is how Western society has become toxic. It's collapsing on itself. Everybody's jaded. Everybody's messed up. Everybody's damaged. From one bad relationship to the next bad relationship, to one broken heart to the next broken heart, and all the stress and mental anguish and emotional trauma that comes with it. Or using and abusing, or getting used and abused. The list goes on, right? This is how the West has been crumbled from the inside out. Remove the morals, remove the accountability, remove the values, remove tradition, market it as innovation or rebellion from the norm or finding your purpose or whatever the hell you want to market it as. There's no standard. There's no wholesome culture anymore, man. It's gone. It's been replaced with hookup culture. It's been replaced with porn. It's been replaced with cheating and Tinder and MySpace and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and objectifying themselves, selling themselves in various ways. Quote unquote modeling, right? Instead of finding your self-worth and self-esteem in parenthood or even something of value like a hobby or learning or achieving something, their value is in thirst. Their value is in attention. Their self-esteem is in knowing that guys want to go to bed with them, to the point where it goes to their head and they become narcissistic in one way or another. They become arrogant. It's hard for a woman who believes she's a queen to not think she deserves queen treatment, queen privilege, diva, right? This diva concept, which has been inundated and laced purposely in all these music videos. I'm a diva, right? It used to be a negative word, right? You don't want to be a diva because divas are hard to deal with. They're not fun. They're not down to earth. They're not genuine. They're not real. But then some marketing quote unquote genius down at the A&R of some record label thought, oh, let's market Mariah Carey as a diva. She'll call herself a diva, and it's a positive thing. It means she has power, and woo woo woo. Now all these young girls out here are calling themselves divas, or it's at least, if they're not calling themselves it, at least it's subconsciously propagandized. That's not a word, but subconsciously conveyed as propaganda into their psyche. which will in turn become their behavior. And when you remove accountability for sex, when you give them a get out of jail free card because they're women, and they can always say, I'm just a woman, and blame men. When you remove accountability and social stigma, boy, that's a recipe for, it's like a kid in a candy store. Everything's at their fingertips. Anything they want. And don't think women don't have lust too. It's just a bit different, but it's there. Anytime they want it. And they learn how to manipulate, use men, sell themselves in one way or another. And this is what men have to look forward to. And these men are out here disenfranchised, lonely, many times fatherless, raised by a single mother, don't know what masculinity is. Women treat them like either they're non-existent, or like they're creepy, or like they're a nuisance. Or even on the other hand, women might treat them like they're sex objects, believe it or not. Chad is getting passed around by all the women, if you think about it. From a different angle. I mean, what a society, What a cesspool, right? So that's how we get to the red pill. And men walking away. And the counter-feminist movement. Will it do any good? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's pretty small. I mean, the red pill is known at this point. But how can you fix 60 years of damage? I mean, incalculable damage. Think of all the emotional damage. Think of the financial damage. The judicial damage, right? Through the court systems, the divorce courts, right? Alimony, child support, visitation rights, abortion, the guilt that comes with that, right? Children growing up out of wedlock, right? Divorce, damage, dysfunction, all for freedom from men who were providing and protecting you, providing for and protecting you. Is that worth it? Did they think it through? Maybe at first it might have seemed good, but how about after a decade? But here we are now in 2022, 60 years later, from this quote-unquote civil rights movement, which part of it was fine when it comes to race and equality, but the second wave feminism thing that piggybacked its way in through that, that's a problem. That's a problem, man. That's a really, really deep, big problem. So, what's the answer, What's the answer? A return to tradition. This is where we get people like Jordan Peterson. Well, did it work? I don't know. Because if only the men jumped on, because men are very willing, we want to return to tradition. It's not that we want to return to the patriarchy per se. We want to go back to something of value. We want to go back to something that has value. This new modern world, this degenerate, immoral, liberal world that they're trying to push on us through the media, through the politics, through the mainstream news, through this, that, the culture, that these far left radical, whatever you want to call them, right? Have pushed on us is keeping us from any kind of semblance of normality, any kind of semblance of health, any kind of semblance of love. And you know, it happens, but is this mainstream, right? The mainstream thing now is to go find yourself. Ooh, girl, you deserve better. Go find yourself. That's the mainstream thing. Do people still get married? Yes. Do people still have kids? Yes. Do people still have successful relationships? Yes. But I would argue that it's becoming less and less the norm. It's becoming less and less the popular thing. It's not part of our culture as much. It's there, but it's not prominent. We just have a chaotic culture. We have a very evil culture, you know. Do as thou wilt, right? That is the whole of the law. What's that from? That's from modern Satanism. You know, so many of these, you know, do what you want to do kind of concepts going on out there. And it's like, maybe you should think about what the right thing is to do. Choose the right thing to do. Choose the wholesome values. You know? And then they label the red pill and MGTOW and men who are speaking the truth about these things and who are voicing what most men are thinking, which is that we want to be men again, and we want quality women, and we want values in our life. We want purpose, and we want structure, and we want health, and we want family and love and a good life and all these things, which is what is being jeopardized and attacked by this degenerate movement. When we come out and do that, then we're labeled, you know, any name in the book, man. We're a problem, you know, according to the mainstream media. And who runs the mainstream media? Well, do your research, right? This is social engineering. But you also have to wonder, why is it working? Why do women choose this route? Why do they not want the traditional values, right? And I believe it starts in the family. I believe it starts in the home, but it's also a culture. Many homes are good, but the culture is degenerate, and the culture warps, and the culture is powerful. And if we allow ourselves to have a culture that has no standards, a culture that has no moral code, no more social stigma, which is, you know, again, is just an enforced kind of culture through social shame. We've removed accountability. We've removed shame. Well, of course everything's going to be degenerate, because that's what shame is. Shame is letting you know that what you're doing is not right. Shame is good. It corrects, it adjusts, right? But no, we have this, oh, you can never shame anything, but yet they shame things, right? They shame God. They shame people who are returning to tradition. They shame they shame the red pill men who are telling the truth, right? But any other kind of shame, oh, you know, you could never shame my sexuality. You could never shame my promiscuity, because that makes you a bigot and a misogynist and a racist, etc., etc. All this stuff these accusations that they throw on anybody who seeks the truth and seeks traditionalism, right? Well, it's a war, man. It's a culture war. It's a psychological war. It's a, you know, it's a war against the family, a war against men in particular, and the casualties are everybody involved, really. Children, the men, the women, family, right? These are the casualties. It's an insidious, it's almost like a parasite or a disease. Yeah, we don't call it that. It's labeled as good. It's labeled as necessary, and people are so brainwashed and duped into thinking that that's the way it should be. Feminism is right. Feminism is, oh, you can't question women. You can't audit feminism, right? Or else you must be a misogynist, right? It's these jumps to conclusions with no logic behind it, right? No further thought than the shallow conclusions that they come to. Anyway, man, we just speak our truth. We try to live by our truths. We try to help. Aside from that, what can we do? Many of us have walked away from the concept of marriage, unfortunately. The concept of child rearing too, because it's just too dangerous in today's day and age. Maybe to the ones who have had some success with that, maybe they'll raise better children, and that's what we can hope for. But anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Appreciate you guys listening. It's been Jay Lee with Northwest Podcast. Peace.